They told me it was an adults-only Christmas dinner. Said Lucas, my 7-year-old son, was just too loud, too curious, too much. So I showed up alone, only to walk into a living room filled with children, my sister's kids, cousins, laughter, chaos, everyone, except my son. That's when I knew. They hadn't just excluded him, they erased him. Hi, I'm Emily, and this is the story of how I left a gift under their perfect tree, and then stood in the middle of that crowded room and exposed the truth they never thought I'd speak. Before we jump into the story, if you don't mind, let me know where you're from by leaving a comment below. That way, I can send a special hello your way. Now go ahead, grab yourself a warm cup of water and find a comfy spot. It's time to begin the story. I never imagined I'd be a widow at 33, but here I was, staring through the frost-covered kitchen window as the snow came down in slow, quiet drifts. Lucas sat at the table behind me, gently tapping his spoon against his bowl of cereal. He wasn't making a mess, he was just thinking. That was how he did it lately, quiet thinking. The chair by the window used to be Daniel's. He'd sit there with his coffee, looking half awake, wrapped in that ridiculous plaid robe he never replaced. He said it was broken and just right. That chair hasn't been touched in months. I wipe it down, sometimes move the cushion to vacuum under it, but no one sits there anymore. I don't think I'd let them. Lucas finally took a bite of cereal and looked up. "Do birds get cold when it snows?" he asked, chewing thoughtfully. "I think so," I said, turning toward him, "but some are built for it." He nodded as if filing that information away for later. That was Lucas. Every question was a doorway, and he always wanted to know what was behind it. Daniel loved that about him. I do too. After breakfast, I helped him pull on his coat and boots. The red sweater underneath peeked out, one Linda had knitted for him last Christmas. It still fit, barely, but he refused to wear anything else when it was cold. There was a tiny white reindeer stitched onto the front, a little crooked, just like Linda's smile when she handed it to him. We stepped outside into the crisp November air. The walk to school wasn't long, but Lucas liked to stop and touch everything along the way. Tree bark, frozen puddles, little piles of crunchy leaves. "Mom," he said as we passed a neighbor's yard, "why do some trees lose their leaves and others don't?" "Because they're different kinds," I said. "Some trees know how to rest in winter, others stay green all year." He seemed satisfied with that. I wasn't sure if I was talking about trees or people anymore. After I dropped him off, I sat in the car for a while before heading to work. The office was quiet that day, mostly spreadsheets and muted conversations. Nobody mentioned Daniel anymore. For them, life had continued. After work, I went straight to Linda and George's house to pick up Lucas. George was in the garage, helping Lucas with some kind of cardboard castle. Linda opened the door, arms crossed against the cold, but her face warm as always. "He's in the back," she said, "built a drawbridge that actually works." I watched from the doorway. Lucas lit up when he saw me, launching into an explanation of how the castle could withstand dragon attacks. George nodded along, like every word was a secret worth keeping. Linda slipped a small envelope into my coat pocket before I could protest. "It's just gas money," she whispered. "Don't argue." I didn't. We'd done this dance before. It wasn't the money. It was the way they insisted on holding us up when I couldn't stand on my own. Later that week, I took Lucas to visit my parents. It had been a while, and I thought maybe things would feel different. They didn't. My mother opened the door already halfway through a phone call, waving us in without looking up. My father barely glanced from his laptop. Lucas wandered into the living room and paused in front of the old grandfather clock. "Grandma, why does that clock creak when it moves?" he asked, voice full of wonder. The air went stiff. My mother sighed, set her phone down, and looked at me, not him. "Can't you teach that boy to be quiet?" she said flatly. "Brandon's kids never asked annoying things like that." Lucas stepped back, blinking. My father handed him an iPad without a word. "Here," he said. "Play a game." I sat beside Lucas on the couch. My nephews sat nearby, glued to their screens, not speaking to anyone. My mother smiled at them like they were angels. Lucas leaned into me slightly. He didn't say anything, but I felt the question forming in his chest. We left not long after. I told my parents I had work early in the morning, which was only half a lie. In the car, I gripped the wheel harder than I needed to. Lucas was in the back seat, staring out the window. His breath fogged the glass. When we got home, I tucked him into bed. He didn't ask for a story that night, just turned on his side and hugged his pillow. I started turning off the light when I heard him whisper, "Mom, did I do something wrong?" I froze. I sat beside him and stroked his hair. "No, baby," I said, voice low. "You didn't do anything wrong." But the truth sat there between us like a shadow I couldn't shake, because I didn't have the answer he really needed. "Emily, we're family," my mother said on the phone, her voice so sweet it almost stuck in my throat. "Shouldn't we support each other now that Daniel's gone?" I was sitting in my car outside the office, the windows fogged from the cold. I held the phone loosely, the engine idling low. Her words sounded innocent, but they came wrapped in something heavier than love. "I suppose," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I knew that tone. I'd heard it for years. It always meant she was leading up to something, and I wasn't going to like it. She sighed dramatically. "You know, with your father's back acting up again and my prescriptions going up, things are just a bit tight. And Anna's doing what she can." There it was. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel. "I didn't know Anna was helping out," I said, mostly to see what she'd say. "Oh, yes, she's been sending us a little every month. Nothing grand, just 400. It's the gesture that matters." A tightness crept up my spine. Anna, who lived in a 3-bedroom condo and whose children went to private art classes, had never once mentioned anything like that, but I didn't challenge it. I knew better. Mom continued, almost breezily, "You've always been our strong one. Stable job, responsible. And with the insurance money, I just thought, maybe you could pitch in a little, too? $1,000 a month isn't much, sweetheart. It's just family helping family." I looked down at my worn gloves. One of the fingertips was starting to split. "I'll think about it," I said, because saying no outright never really ended the conversation. But the moment I hung up, I already knew. I'd do it. Not because I could, but because part of me still believed that maybe, just maybe, they'd look at Lucas differently if I did. That weekend, we went to their house for dinner. Lucas wore the same red sweater with the reindeer. He'd added a little blue pin to the collar, a sticker he'd earned for reading an entire chapter book at school. He was proud, even if no one else seemed to notice. Anna was already there, sitting on the couch with her kids, all 3 of them hypnotized by glowing screens. Jason had his legs stretched out on the coffee table. Lily had wireless earbuds in, chewing something with a snap every few seconds. Emma stared at her tablet, giggling every now and then at videos I didn't dare ask about. Lucas, ever the explorer, wandered over to the shelf by the dining room and pointed to the old record player. "Grandpa, how does that thing play music?" he asked, genuinely curious. My father didn't look up. "It's old," he muttered, clicking the remote. "Ask your mother." Lucas turned to me. I started to respond, but my mother beat me to it. "Emily," she said from the kitchen, her voice sharp this time, "can't you teach him to sit still and stop asking so many questions? It's exhausting." Lucas blinked. His hand dropped from the edge of the record player. My hands curled around the back of the dining chair. I didn't speak. Dinner was a quiet affair, at least for Lucas and me. Anna's children slurped pasta, tapped their screens, and got complimented for being so well behaved. My son, who'd tried to engage, now stirred his plate with quiet fingers. The worst came just as dessert was being served. My mother leaned over to one of her church friends, smiling as she spooned pudding into a dish. "Emily's always been the generous one," she said lightly. "So thoughtful. Not like Anna. She has her own family to worry about." I stared at my napkin. The stitching was coming loose at the edge. Anna didn't flinch. She just smirked behind her wine glass. When we got back to the car, Lucas looked up at me as I buckled him in. "Was I too loud?" he asked softly. "No, sweetheart," I said, kissing his forehead. "You were perfect." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what Daniel used to say when I worried too much. People will take what you give until you start saying no, but that doesn't mean they're worth what you're giving. The next morning, I was sipping lukewarm coffee in the kitchen when my phone rang again. It was my mother. "Hi, Em," she said, overly bright. "Just wanted to invite you to our Christmas Eve dinner. Same time as always." I smiled slightly. Maybe things were smoothing out. She paused for effect. "Oh, and just so you know, it'll be adults only this year. We want something a bit more refined." I stared out the window, the fog still clinging to the glass. Snow hadn't started falling yet, but the sky looked heavy. "Lucas isn't invited?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Oh, sweetheart, you know how these things go. Wine, conversation. Too many kids just makes it hard to enjoy." My grip tightened around the mug. "Okay," I said. "Thanks for letting me know." When the call ended, I didn't move. I sat there in silence, the cold from the window seeping through the glass, pressing into my back. I looked at the red sweater draped over the arm of the couch. Even $1,000 a month couldn't buy them the decency to treat my son like family. I arrived at my parents' house alone, clutching a gift bag with Lucas's name on the tag. It was the same bag he decorated last week, with crooked stars and glitter glue that hadn't fully dried. He didn't know I'd be bringing it without him. The front door opened before I even knocked. Warm light spilled out onto the porch, and a blast of cinnamon, roasted ham, and mulled wine hit me like a memory I hadn't asked for. "Emily, you made it," Anna said, already halfway into a hug. Her voice was a little too high, her smile a little too quick. I didn't hug back. I stepped inside. Holiday music drifted from the speakers, soft piano versions of old carols. The house looked just like every Christmas Eve growing up. Tree glowing, fireplace crackling, relatives balancing drinks while chatting over trays of crackers and cheese. It could have been any year, but it wasn't, because this time, Lucas wasn't with me. My mother's words echoed in my head. It'll be more elegant this year. Wine, conversation, no noisy kids. And yet, there they were. Jason was running laps around the living room with a toy sword, knocking a pillow off the couch as Lily screamed in mock terror. Emma sat cross-legged under the tree, tearing into a gift with wild excitement, while Aunt Lucy's youngest threw wrapping paper into the air like snow. An older cousin walked past me and grinned. "Hey, where's Lucas? He's always good for a story or two." I smiled tightly and didn't answer. I kept walking. The gift bag felt heavier than it was. I held it close to my chest, trying not to crush the bow Lucas insisted I tape just right. I made my way through the room slowly, watching the scene unfold like I was outside the window instead of in it. My father was in his usual spot by the fireplace, sipping wine and laughing at something Uncle Dean said. My mother moved between guests, cheeks pink from the wine, tossing compliments like confetti. I found her near the kitchen, arranging napkins on a platter like it was a work of art. She turned and smiled like I was just another guest. "I thought this was adults only," I said softly, close enough for only her to hear. She blinked once, then looked away. "Lucas asks too many questions. He's too much, Emily. I didn't want a scene tonight." Too much. That's what she thought of my son. I stepped back. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the music anymore. My fingers tightened around the gift bag until the handles creased. I turned away from her and walked straight to the center of the room. I cleared my throat, louder than I meant to. The piano music kept playing, but a few heads turned. I felt my hands tremble, but I didn't stop. "Everyone," I said, my voice a little too sharp. "You're probably wondering why I came alone tonight, why Lucas isn't here." A hush fell. Even the kids paused. I looked around the room. My mother stood frozen, still holding the napkins. Anna stepped closer to her husband, clutching her wine glass. "I was told this was an adults-only gathering," I said. "No kids allowed. That's what my mother told me." I paused and gestured to the chaos around us, but clearly that wasn't the truth. No one moved. I held up the gift bag slightly. "Lucas made this. He was so excited to give his cousins presents tonight. He doesn't know he wasn't invited. I told him there was a mix-up with the time." A few aunts exchanged glances. One of them, Aunt Beth, put a hand to her mouth. "I've spent months trying to make things work with this family," I continued, the words coming faster now. "Since Daniel passed, I've been doing everything I can to keep some kind of peace. I've sent $1,000 every month to help Mom and Dad, thinking it might bring us closer, hoping they'd treat Lucas with some care, some decency." The silence deepened. "I was told Anna sends $400 too," I said, turning to my sister. "But I know now that wasn't true." Anna's smile cracked, her cheeks drained of color. "Emily, don't," I said. "You sat there and let them tell me I wasn't doing enough. You let them shame my son while yours watched TV and got praised for it." My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. I turned toward the crowd again. My son, who lost his father, who still wakes up crying some nights, was left out of this family's most joyful night because he's curious, because he talks, because he still has light in him that hasn't been dulled by screens or silence. I looked down, blinking fast, then up again. "I'm done!" Someone, maybe Aunt Lucy, whispered, "That poor boy?" My father stood now, his expression unreadable. My mother still hadn't moved. I stepped toward the tree. Every box was neatly wrapped, ribbons perfect, tags handwritten. I set Lucas's gift down gently, its glittery stars catching the firelight. "This," I said, "is the last thing I'll leave in this house." Then I turned and walked out. The music was still playing, the fireplace still crackled, but everything felt colder than the snow that hit my face when I stepped outside. The morning after Christmas, I woke up to 20 unread texts and a silence in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Not the aching kind of silence that creeps in after loss. This was different, like someone had turned off a buzzing sound I hadn't realized was always there. Lucas was still asleep, curled up under the quilt Linda made for him last winter. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, the morning gray and still outside the window. No traffic, no wind, no family voices rising in forced cheer. Just quiet. I opened my banking app. The monthly transfer had gone out automatically that morning, just like it had every month. $1,000, neatly withdrawn, sent to the same account my parents used to pay their lawn guy, their cable bill, maybe Anna's holiday flights. I stared at the confirmation, thumb hovering. Then I canceled it. It took 2 taps. A little pop-up appeared. Recurring transfer canceled. I watched it for a moment as if the screen might ask me if I was sure. But nothing happened. It was done. No more trying to buy love that never wanted to be earned. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Andrew, Anna's husband. "Emily," he said, his voice low and measured. "I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" I asked, surprised. "For saying what no one else had the guts to," he said. "After you left, well, let's just say the party ended real fast." He told me how he'd confronted Anna in front of everyone, how he'd asked her to confirm out loud that she'd lied about sending money. When she couldn't answer, he'd packed up the kids and left. "They're with me at my parents' house," he said. "I told Anna I need time to think. I can't raise my kids in that kind of environment." I didn't say much. What was there to say? Pain, when it surfaces like that, has a way of reshaping people. Later that afternoon, while Lucas and I were stringing paper stars across the living room, the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw them, my parents. They stood on the porch holding a large gift box wrapped in red paper. My mother wore a thick scarf, her makeup softer than usual. My father's hands were tucked into his coat pockets, but he shifted uncomfortably, like he wasn't used to standing still without being in control. I cracked the door open, just enough to keep the warmth inside. "Emily," my mother began, her voice unusually gentle, "we've thought a lot about what happened." My father cleared his throat. "We made mistakes. We didn't mean to hurt you." My mother stepped forward, holding out the box. "It's something for Lucas. We want to make things right." Behind them, Anna stood a few steps back, arms wrapped around herself. Her eyes were red. "Emily," she called softly, "I really am sorry. I messed up." I looked at the box. Glossy paper, shiny bow, a tidy offering. I kept my expression calm. "You're not here because you're sorry," I said. "You're here because people saw what you did." My mother blinked, wounded. My father looked away. "You spent years ignoring my son, belittling his curiosity. Then you excluded him from Christmas, and now that the curtain's been pulled back, you want a do-over." Anna stepped forward. "Please, I've already lost Andrew. I don't want to lose you, too." I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. "You didn't lose me because of Christmas Eve," I said. "You lost me the day you decided to lie about sending money and stood by while our parents treated my son like a burden." They were quiet then. Behind me, I heard the soft sound of Lucas humming in the living room, still threading stars through yarn. "I'm setting some boundaries," I said. "No more unannounced visits. No more gifts without meaning. And you don't get to show up and pretend none of this happened." My mother's voice cracked. "So, you're cutting us off?" I didn't answer. I just closed the door. It clicked softly into place. Final, but not angry. Just necessary. That evening, Linda and George stopped by. They didn't knock right away. George sent a quick text first, asking if it was a good time. They brought a container of leftover cookies and a scarf Lucas had forgotten at their house. No big declarations. No heavy conversations. Just warmth. We sat in the kitchen while Lucas played with his science kit on the floor. Linda sipped her tea and told me about a bakery in town she wanted to take him to. George leaned back in the chair, nodding as Lucas explained the difference between a comet and an asteroid. And I realized then, I had never once needed to explain my son to them. They just saw him, accepted him, loved him. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and cocoa. The stars Lucas made glimmered across the living room archway. And in the soft hum of the evening, I felt something settle inside me, a piece I hadn't known I'd been missing. The first time Lucas called George Grandpa, it slipped out so naturally that all of us froze for a second. He was standing in Linda's kitchen, holding his school science project, a carefully glued volcano with tiny trees around the base. George had just leaned in to inspect the little paper labels Lucas had added: eruption zone, lava flow, and my personal favorite, dangerous gas. Lucas pointed at one of the details and said with pure excitement, "Look what I added, Grandpa!" George's eyebrows lifted. Linda looked over from the stove, a wooden spoon in her hand. I blinked. Lucas didn't notice our silence. He kept talking, animated and confident, just like he used to with Daniel. George smiled, kneeling to eye level, and said simply, "That's brilliant, buddy." No one corrected him. After that, it just stuck. In February, the skies in Portland were still gray most days, but the cold had softened. The cherry trees began to bud early. I opened a savings account for Lucas that same month. I transferred the first $1,000, the same amount I used to send to my parents. Watching the confirmation screen light up, I felt a quiet joy bloom in my chest. The money wasn't going to guilt or silence anymore. It was going to something real, a future. Spring came slowly, the kind that makes you forget winter ever happened. Daniel's cousins invited us to a backyard barbecue in early April. Their house was tucked behind a grove of pines with a swing set that squeaked just enough to sound like childhood. Lucas ran around with Henry and Alex, chasing bubbles and then falling into a pile of leaves. When he skinned his elbow, Aunt Kate cleaned it and gave him a cookie before he could even sniffle. No one looked at me like I needed to explain who we were. We just belonged. I sat on the porch with a glass of lemonade watching George help the boys fly paper airplanes. Linda was inside with Kate laughing about something over a bowl of salad. Someone turned on music, an old Motown song that made my toes tap without thinking. Later that week, Lucas brought home a permission slip. His class was doing a presentation on your favorite person. He asked if I could help him print a photo of Grandma Linda. "Are you sure you don't want to do it about your teacher or someone at school?" I asked gently. "No," he said, already digging through his backpack. "Grandma Linda bakes with me, and she says I ask the best questions, and she listens, even when my stories are long." I smiled and printed the photo. That weekend, we made chocolate chip cookies in Linda's kitchen. Lucas stood on a stool, apron crooked, eyes bright. He read every step from the recipe card like he was hosting a cooking show. Linda let him crack the eggs, even when the second one splashed too hard. George walked in and announced, "Smells like something special in here." Lucas beamed. "We're baking for the family cookout." That word, family, sounded different now. It didn't carry obligation or resentment. It felt like warmth, laughter, cookies cooling on wire racks. It felt like people who showed up because they wanted to, not because they were supposed to. At bedtime, Lucas brushed his teeth and then crawled into bed, clutching the soft plush bear George had given him on his birthday. I sat beside him, smoothing his blanket over his legs. "Mom," he whispered, eyes half closed, "can we always stay here? With our real family?" I paused, heart tight but full. "As long as I'm breathing," I said softly, brushing a curl from his forehead. He smiled without opening his eyes. That night, after he drifted off, I sat on the couch alone, wrapped in the quiet. Outside, the spring rain tapped lightly on the windows. The house was still, but not empty. I thought about everything we'd lost and what we'd built from the ashes. This wasn't the family I was born with, but it was the one I'd choose, over and over again. Our living room smelled like cinnamon and pine, and Lucas was dancing around the tree in his bright red sweater, the same one Linda had knitted for his first Christmas without Daniel. It was a little snug now, sleeves shorter than they used to be, but he wore it anyway, proudly. His cheeks were pink from excitement, and his eyes glowed like the lights strung across the windows. He held the paper star we'd made together that morning and climbed up onto the footstool, tongue poking out in concentration. "Steady," he muttered, reaching for the top of the tree. I stood just behind him, ready in case he wobbled, but he didn't. He placed the star carefully and turned to me with both arms raised like a gymnast, landing a perfect dismount. "Ta-da!" I laughed and wrapped him in a hug. Perfect. In the kitchen, hot cocoa simmered on the stove, the kind with tiny marshmallows that melted into soft clouds. The fireplace crackled softly. Our home, once so heavy with silence, now buzzed gently with the hum of something new, something whole. By 6, the doorbell rang. George walked in first, holding a pie dish and shaking snow off his scarf. Linda followed with a tin of cookies and a paper bag filled with wrapped gifts. Behind them came Uncle Robert, his wife Kate, and their 2 boys, Alex and Henry, who immediately challenged Lucas to a board game. The house filled quickly, with laughter, footsteps, voices overlapping in joy instead of tension. We ate roasted chicken and mashed sweet potatoes, passed around mugs of cocoa, and shared stories. Robert told a tale about Daniel trying to fix a leaky faucet and accidentally flooding half the kitchen. Linda added, "And then he blamed the wrench." We all laughed, even me. Maybe especially me. When it was time for gifts, they were simple, just the way we liked them. Lucas opened a brand new science kit, a thick picture book about space, and a soft blue sweater that read, "Dream Big," stitched across the front in Linda's careful hand. "I love it," he beamed, pulling it over his red one like a cape. He hugged everyone, not out of habit or obligation, but because he meant it. His joy was so open, so unfiltered, it filled the room like warmth from the fire. After dinner, we played board games by candlelight. Henry insisted on being the banker, while George cheated, badly and obviously, just to make Lucas laugh. We passed a bowl of peppermint bark around the room and pretended not to notice when Robert's dog stole a cookie from the coffee table. At one point, I stepped outside to catch my breath, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I wanted to take it all in. The snow was falling in slow, lazy flakes, the kind that glowed under porch light and clung to tree branches like lace. I stood there for a moment, arms wrapped around myself, and let the stillness settle over me. 1 year ago, I'd walked away from a house full of people who never really saw us. Tonight, our house, this house, was full of people who did. I hadn't just survived the year. I had reshaped it, reimagined it. I had pulled my son out of a shadow and brought him into the light. And in doing so, I found it again for myself, too. When I came back inside, the fire had burned lower. The boys were dozing in a pile of blankets, and Lucas lay curled up on the couch, his new teddy bear tucked beneath his arm, his breathing soft and even. I kissed his forehead, brushed a bit of hair away from his eyes, and whispered, "This is what family feels like." Linda and George began gathering their coats. Kate helped tidy the wrapping paper, and Robert turned off the game's last flashing light. They all kissed Lucas goodnight, careful not to wake him, and one by one they stepped back into the snowy night. After the door closed, I turned toward the mantel. Daniel's photo sat in its usual place, a quiet sentinel. His smile still caught the light just right. I walked over, pressed my hand gently against the frame, and whispered, "We're okay." I kept my promise. Behind me, the fire popped once more, and Lucas stirred slightly but didn't wake. I sank into the armchair by the tree, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like cookies and pine, and let myself exhale fully, for the first time in what felt like forever. There were no more gifts to open, no more performances to give, just us, just love, just enough. There was a quiet moment after everyone had gone and the snow whispered against the window when I looked at Lucas sleeping and realized we weren't just surviving anymore. We were safe and seen and deeply loved. The house wasn't full of noise or tradition, but it was full of something stronger: choice, warmth, and belonging. In life, we don't always get the family we hope for, but we do get the chance to build one rooted in love, honesty, and care. Sometimes the hardest part is walking away from what's familiar to protect what truly matters. And sometimes healing begins the moment we stop trying to earn love and start accepting the love freely given. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of your own journey toward peace, I'd be honored to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share, reflect, or simply carry this story with you as a quiet reminder. Love, when chosen freely, is the greatest gift of all.